Welcome to White Shadows. Today, I bring you bone-chilling horror stories for the new year. I dare you to listen to all of them. So, put on your earphones and hold your pillow tight. Here goes the first tale. The Sound from the Roof. Adam was the introverted kid who lived with his mom and dad in the heart of Melbourne, Australia. His winter holidays had just begun, and as usual, he preferred to keep to himself. While other kids were playing outside, Adam was content to watch movies or spend hours playing Counter-Strike on his dad's laptop. It was New Year's Eve, around 7 or 8 p.m. His parents had just left for his father's boss's New Year party, as they always did, leaving Adam alone in the house. He never joined them, preferring the quiet of home over the noise of social gatherings. After they left, he opened his father's laptop and began watching an action movie, the sound of gunfire and explosions filling the empty house. About an hour later, just as the movie reached an intense scene, a strange noise broke through the silence. It was a faint scratching sound, coming from somewhere above him. At first, Adam thought it might be an animal, perhaps a bird or a branch scraping against the roof in the wind. He shrugged it off and continued watching the movie, but the sound grew louder. It was no longer a simple scratching. It began to sound like something was dragging itself across the roof, scraping metal. Adam's heart skipped a beat as the noise grew more intense, now resembling the sound of an iron rod being dragged across the roof, scratching and scraping with a rhythmic, maddening consistency. He paused the movie, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The silence in the house felt oppressive now, broken only by the eerie scraping above. Probably a loose sheet of metal or something, Adam muttered to himself, trying to calm the anxiety rising in his chest. He grabbed his phone to check the time, 9:15 p.m. His parents were still not home. The scratching continued, louder and more persistent, now joined by a strange thudding sound, as if something heavy was being dragged from one side of the roof to the other. Adam's hands began to shake, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. Slowly, he stood up and walked towards a window, trying to peer out and see if there was anything unusual on the roof. He couldn't see much, just the dark silhouette of the roof against the night sky. He was about to step back when a loud crash echoed from above, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy hitting the roof. The noise was so violent that it made Adam jump back, his heart racing. His first instinct was to run outside and check, but something told him to stay inside. The thought of what might be up there sent a wave of cold dread over him. Just then, the scratching stopped. An eerie silence fell over the house. Adam's breath quickened, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone anymore. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Adam froze, his mind racing. Who could be here at this hour? His parents had the only keys to the house, and no one else should have known he was alone. His hand trembled as he slowly walked toward the door, his mind torn between opening it and running to hide. The doorbell rang again, more urgently this time. Against every instinct telling him to stay away, Adam slowly reached for the door handle. The moment his fingers brushed it, the scratching sound returned, louder than before. It was no longer coming from the roof. It was coming from inside the walls. As the door creaked open, Adam's eyes widened in horror. The cold winter wind blew in, but there was no one at the doorstep. No one but the darkness of the night. The scratching suddenly stopped. Adam's heart raced as fear gripped him. Without thinking, he slammed the door shut, then dashed to his room and locked it behind him. He threw himself into bed, pulling the blanket tightly around his trembling body, praying for his parents to come home as quickly as possible. Time seemed to stretch on forever as he lay there, every creak and groan of the house sending shivers down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still lurking nearby. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Adam heard the sound of his parents' car pulling into the driveway. His heart skipped a beat. Adam immediately told them everything. His father listened intently, his expression growing more serious by the second. Without a word, he grabbed a cricket bat from the corner of the room, his jaw set with determination. "Stay here," he said, his voice firm, before walking toward the door. He checked the roof, the yard, and every corner of the house, but found no sign of anything unusual. No intruder, no strange footprints, nothing out of place. Just a cold, quiet night. Are you scared? If not, the next story will make sure you are. It's called the Eclipse Curse. It was New Year's Eve in Delhi, India. The streets buzzed with life. People laughing, eating street food, and celebrating under the glow of colorful lights. Karen and Madhu, a young couple eager to join the festivities, dressed their best and stepped out into the chilly night air. They planned to hit their usual party spot, a lively club they frequented, but were disheartened to find it closed for renovations. Disappointed but undeterred, they decided to search for another venue. Karen suggested finding a place less crowded, but still vibrant enough to enjoy the night. They wandered through the bustling streets, walking about 500 meters, when they noticed a faint, pulsating light emanating from a narrow, shadowy street. It wasn't a typical party area, but curiosity got the better of them. As they approached, the light grew brighter, revealing a club nestled in the corner of the alley. The building looked old, almost decrepit, but was decorated with vibrant neon lights spelling out Eclipse. The music was faint, almost hypnotic, and they felt an unexplainable pull toward the entrance. A tall, thin guard stood at the door, his face gaunt but smiling. "Come in, sir, madam," he said, his voice raspy and his smile unervingly wide. There was something off about him, but the allure of the place overpowered their hesitation. Besides, every other spot was packed, and it was already 10 p.m. As they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The music was intoxicating, but the crowd felt unnatural. Everyone seemed to move in perfect sync, their faces obscured by dim lighting. The air was heavy, carrying a metallic tang that stung Madhu's nose. She dismissed it as her imagination and followed Karen further in. They ordered drinks and tried to dance, but something wasn't right. The people around them didn't speak or interact, only swaying rhythmically, their faces blank. The DJ, a shadowy figure barely visible behind the console, never looked up. A chill crept up Madhu's spine when she felt a sharp sting on her hand. Looking down, she saw 3 deep scratches that hadn't been there moments before. "Karen, look at this," she whispered urgently, showing him her hand. His face turned pale, and they decided to leave immediately. As they stepped outside, the night felt eerily still. They checked Karen's watch, 10 p.m. It was impossible. They had been inside for at least an hour, but the time hadn't changed. Panicking, they hurried back to the main street. When they glanced over their shoulders, the alley was dark. The neon lights of the club were gone, and so was the guard. It was as if the place had never existed, but the scratches on Madhu's hand remained, stinging as a chilling reminder. Weeks later, curiosity got the better of Karen. He searched online for any mention of the club named Eclipse. What he found froze his blood. Stories of a cursed club that appeared only on New Year's Eve, trapping its victims in a time loop. Those who escaped were marked and haunted forever. Don't go anywhere. The scariest is still left. This one is called the Blackbell Tower Chimes. It was New Year's Eve in London, and the city was alive with excitement. Streets were packed with revelers. The Thames sparkled with reflections of fireworks, and Big Ben prepared to ring in another year. Amidst the cheer, a lesser-known tradition was whispered among locals, a visit to Blackbell Tower. Located in the forgotten district of Grimsway, Blackbell Tower was infamous for its chilling history. Once a church, it had been abandoned after a series of mysterious deaths during its New Year's services centuries ago. It was said that at the stroke of midnight, the tower's bell rang, even though it had been removed long ago. Those who heard it were never seen again. Catherine and her friends Daniel and Laura laughed off the tales. They were adventure seekers, the kind who loved to challenge the unknown. On a dare, they decided to visit the tower that night. The path to Grimsway was shadowy and desolate, a stark contrast to the festive streets they had left behind. The tower loomed before them, its silhouette jagged against the moonlit sky. The air grew colder as they approached, and an unnatural silence replaced the distant sounds of celebration. The heavy wooden door creaked open with a touch, revealing a crumbling interior. Shadows danced on the walls, and the faint smell of decay lingered in the air. "Just an old building," Daniel muttered, his voice betraying his unease. They climbed the spiral staircase to the belfry. At the top, the night's chill intensified, and an unsettling sense of being watched crept over them. Catherine ran her hand along the weathered stone railing. "See? No bell," she said, her voice echoing eerily. Suddenly, a deep, resonant chime reverberated through the air. "Midnight? That's impossible," Laura gasped. The sound was deafening, shaking the tower to its core. The walls seemed to pulsate, and shadows writhed like living things. Catherine felt a sharp tug on her arm and turned to see Daniel's face contorted in terror. "We need to get out," he screamed, but his voice was drowned out by the unrelenting tolling of the phantom bell. The staircase vanished. The walls seemed to close in, replaced by endless darkness. Catherine's friends were no longer by her side. Their screams echoed from somewhere far away. The bell's toll grew louder, each strike like a hammer against her skull. She ran, but there was no escape. The darkness became suffocating, and ghostly figures emerged, their faces pale and eyes hollow. They reached for her, whispering in voices that didn't sound human. When Catherine awoke, she was on the cobblestone street outside the tower. The door was sealed shut, and the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. Her friends were gone. She reported their disappearance, but the authorities found no trace of Daniel or Laura. Years later, on New Year's Eve, Catherine heard the unmistakable chime of Blackbell Tower from her flat miles away. A single word echoed in her mind, chilling her to the bone. Soon.